Hi everyone and welcome to another recipe video, and this was going to be a cooking chat, but seeing as it involves tempering chocolate without a thermometer and it's a little bit more complicated, then I figured that I would just turn it into a normal recipe video and talk you through it. So here you can see my very cheap silicone sphere mold which we're going to use for the Matcha chocolate bombs. It is super thin and honestly you get what you pay for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my slightly pricier and sturdier, smaller sphere molds to line the bottoms so you can stand on those and the chocolates can keep their shape. Why don't I use these ones instead? Well, they're just a little bit small and I like my bombs big. Now I'm going to make 2 bombs, which means there'll be 1 hemisphere left over, but this will be my insurance hemisphere in case I screw up and break one. It's always good to have a spare anyway. Right, so first we're going to start with the trickiest part, which is tempering the chocolate. So we're going to add some hot water to a small pan and create a water bath by popping a bowl on top. Make sure the water doesn't touch the bottom of the bowl. And now we're going to add about half to 2/3 of 100 grams of white chocolate, keeping the rest back for a bit later, because you're going to want to melt this bit by bit. Add 2 teaspoonfuls of matcha. I like to sift it so it's nice and smooth. And then what you want to do is you want to melt this until it's mostly completely melted, but not totally, so it's still a little bit chunky. Now if you watched my previous video, which was baked matcha donuts, you'll find this very familiar because I did the exact same thing to make the chocolate decorations. Now remember, you absolutely must temper chocolate if you want it to set properly at room temperature. If you just melt it over high heat, you're destroying all of those cocoa butter crystals, which will ensure that it sets properly at room temperature. It will still set if you put it in the fridge, but you'll find that it goes really floppy when you take it out again. The most accurate way to temper chocolate is with a chocolate thermometer, but I don't have one, so the way I do it is to introduce melted chocolate into already set chocolate to sort of force it to remember how to set again. So you can see here I'm gradually introducing more chocolate bit by bit until no more will melt. And it's gone really thick. As you can see, I'm at the point where I'm literally adding 1 button at a time now, and it's not melting anymore, which means the melted chocolate has cooled down to a tempered temperature and the crystals are about ready, and you can see the chocolate's really thick now. But I want it a little bit thinner to make it easier to put into the mould. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pop that bowl onto the heat again, but literally just for a few seconds so it loosens up a bit. You don't want it too hot or you'll get rid of all of that hard work and all of the nice cocoa butter crystals. So just a few seconds. It takes me about 25 minutes to temper chocolate this way. I should really get myself a chocolate thermometer. Anyway, as you can see, I'm now spreading that chocolate onto the inside of the mould, being generous and being careful not to leave any holes. And because the chocolate is still liquid, it's going to have a tendency to pool at the bottom. So I'm concentrating on trying to make the top edges thicker to give it a bit more of a stronger structure. And you'll see in a minute that I do miss a spot in this very last one, which I only noticed when I was popping them out of the molds, but you know what, never mind, I've got 4 good ones and that one can be a snack. Now just pop these in the fridge to set for about 20 minutes. Now we're going to make the cake, so you're going to need 55 grams of unsalted butter and caster sugar. Whiz it up until it's nice and creamy. As you can see, I forgot to turn it on. And make sure your butter's at room temperature so it's nice and soft. It makes it much easier to cream together. Now we're going to add 1 egg. And we're just going to whisk that until it's creamy again. By the way, if you haven't preheated your oven yet, do it now. You'll need 180 degrees C. Now we're going to add 55 grams of self-raising flour. Sift in 2 teaspoons of matcha. And add just a little pinch of salt. And just give it a whiz until it's just combined. You don't want the sponge to be too tough, so don't overbeat it. And finally, I'm just going to add 1 tablespoonful of milk just to loosen the mixture up a bit. Now I'm going to prepare my mini baking tray, which I've sort of cobbled together with some kitchen foil. I'm going to grease it with some vegetable oil. and tear a hole in the foil, but don't worry, no one will notice. I'm just going to patch it up and stick it down with the oil. And now we're going to scoop all that lovely matcha sponge mixture into the mould. I'm just going to scrape it so that it's flat-ish, and then we're just going to bake it in our preheated oven for about 20 minutes. And once it's out, just let it cool in a wire rack. Right, it's time to manhandle some chocolate, so I'm going to put my gloves on so I don't get my little fingerprints on the lovely shiny chocolate domes. So we're going to carefully pop these babies out. I'm just getting rid of my little structure supports. And yes, you can see the place where I missed a spot on the bottom right one very clearly at this point. Shh, that'll be a snack. Just ease them out, peeling the mould back, no squeezing, no pushing. Just be very careful because these are thin. And isn't that gorgeous despite the hole? Let's do the rest. Now that these are done, we need to create an entryway to fit the cake in. So what we're going to do is we're going to stamp out holes in 2 of them using a metal cutter that I'm heating up in some hot water. Mind your fingers. Dry the mould, and we're going to pop it on top of one of them. This may take 1 or 2 goes. You do not want to push or stress out your chocolate spheres. You just want to gently rest the hot cutter on top until it melts through. As you can see, I'm being very cautious here, probably a little more than I need to, but better safe than sorry. And remember, you're going to want to do this to 2 of them, because then you're going to use 2 whole ones to stick on top, so you have a sphere with a hole at the bottom. And when you start to break through, you can just give the top a little tap like this, and out it pops. Isn't that neat? And guess what? We have another snack right here, so just keep that and chomp on it later. Now here's my sneaky trick to stick the hemispheres together. You're going to need more boiling hot water, and you're going to put a tray, a metal one, on it, and that tray is going to heat up very quickly. Just put 2 hemispheres on top, one with a hole, one without, literally just for a few seconds, you don't want them melting away. And now you're going to stick them together with that melted rim. Just be patient and slow about it, you don't have to rush, and smooth the melted chocolate around it as you go, like this. And here we go, we've got 2 spheres. One of them's a bit shorter because I kept them on the tray for a bit too long, so that's what you want to avoid. Right, now we're going to cut some cake out to fit inside the spheres. Obviously there's too much cake here. Oh, scratch that, there is never too much cake. I mean there's too much cake for the 2 bombs. So you're going to have some left over, which is fine, just pop it in the bowl and eat it later. And what I do here is I level out the top with a bread knife, but you don't have to do that, you can just get straight to cutting the shapes out. Don't worry, I don't waste any of this, I put it all away and have them as leftovers later. Cool, I love that green colour, isn't that fabulous? I love matcha, as you probably might have guessed with all of my matcha recipes by now. And next you're going to want to take that same size cutter that you used to cut the holes out of the chocolate and use them on the cake. You're just going to need 2. This is super satisfying, I could do this all day, the cake is so soft and spongy, it's just so much fun. Before we make the sauce, we want to plate up now because once the sauce is made we want to serve it immediately. So pop a cake on a serving plate, and we're going to layer it up with 1 freshly sliced strawberry, pop on a chocolate bombshell, and then we're just going to add a few more berries. You can watch me struggle as I figure out how I want to plate it up here. I figure it out eventually. There we go. And finally the sauce. We're going to take 1 vanilla bean, split it lengthways. This is an ancient one, by the way. I've had this vanilla bean floating around in my cupboard for a year, so you can see it's a bit dry, but it's still good. I'm going to add 300 milliliters of double cream to a small saucepan. Add all that vanilla-y goodness, both the stalky bit and the beans inside. And I'm going to add 1 tablespoonful of caster sugar, and I'm going to heat this until it's steaming but not simmering. Once it's steaming, I'm going to add 1 teaspoonful of corn flour mixed with 1 tablespoonful of water, and this is what's going to thicken it, almost like a thin custard or a creme anglaise. And once it's thickened, you're going to get rid of those vanilla beans. Be careful, it's hot, you can see me struggle a bit here. Preferably don't use your hands like I did. Do as I say, kids, not as I do. Just give it a bit more of a stir to make sure it's thick enough. It will leave a trail at the bottom of the pan, like this, with a spoon. And now we want to serve immediately, preferably not spilling everything everywhere. Now this is a fantastic show-stopping dessert, and doesn't it look really Christmassy as well for some reason? Maybe it's the red and the green. This would make a great alternative to Christmas pudding. So you want to slather on that hot sauce, and it's going to melt the matcha chocolate. You don't have to use quite as much sauce as I'm using here, I just like my sauce. Just remember that the chocolate will continue to melt because that cream will still be warm. Thanks again for watching and or listening, guys. Remember you can find this full recipe on my blog tashcakes.com, and as always you can follow me on Instagram at tashcakestaste, where I live my days. Way too much. Spend way too much time on there. But interestingly a little less now that I'm on YouTube. And of course I'll see you next Wednesday for my next video. Stay safe, be nice, and have a good week. And Merry Christmas too!